Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if the Sino-Soviet split never happened. What is the Sino-Soviet split, first of all? The Sino-Soviet split is the term we use nowadays to explain what happened between the USSR and the People's Republic of China. Both countries, they were theoretically communist countries, but in practice they had different interpretations of Marxism. Mao was more favorable to Stalinism, but he was not a Stalinist, seeing the farmers as more important than Stalin. And when Khrushchev took power, Mao thought of Khrushchev as a revisionist, when in fact Mao himself was a revisionist. His economic policies did not match with those of Mao. There were also other more unofficial reasons. The Soviet Union was, geographically speaking, a bigger threat for China than the US. The Soviet Union had lands which were seen as officially Chinese. And the Soviet Union wanted to run the show, while Mao had a very big ego. As a result, it was just a matter of time until both countries would not agree on certain principles, and they would go separate ways. The Soviet Union had similar falling out with like Tito, for instance, the Yugoslav leader, hence the Sino-Soviet split was nothing exceptional. This proved to be a blessing in disguise for the Chinese. China needed to seek some form of collaboration with the US, and once that happened, China's economy improved and still sees record growth going on until OTL, while the Soviet Union is no more. So what if all of that changed? What if the Sino-Soviet split never happens? In this scenario, there could be different things going on and happening. Let's just assume that, for instance, 1. Mao would unexpectedly die. 2. The Soviets would give concessions, almost impossible. 3. The US would somehow threaten the very existence of the People's Republic of China. This option about the US somehow threatening the very existence of the People's Republic of China could go the following way. It could happen in that way that, for instance, all of Korea would be united under the South, which means that the Chinese and the Soviets would have to stick closer together. Or we could just say that the Chinese would still support the Korean North, knowing that the Soviets would not try to send troops in Korea because of other very logical reasons. Of course, this is now a very exaggerated thing to say, but there could be possibilities like this where the Chinese would be more understanding, probably because of it, and the Soviets would still have to stretch their troops, still keep the European parts that they gained more under check. Perhaps there could be some options. So instead of saying that Mao would suddenly die, we should go with the last option, where both countries would see the US as bigger threat, and even a threat to the very existence not only of the People's Republic of China but also of the Soviet Union. If Mao dies during those years, we can actually still see a lot of chaos going on. In this timeline, instead of diffusing and searching for a dialogue, the US would also have a much more hardline policy against the People's Republic of China. And as a result, Mao would rather side with the Soviets, despite the differences than standing alone. The fear in this timeline would be that the Soviets and the US could team up against the People's Republic of China, thus staying an ally with the Soviet Union would still make a lot more sense. South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and much of Southeast Asia could be used as bases to support the Republic of China and provoke a regime change. The Soviets would have similar fears, and thus outside threats would outweigh the geopolitical reality. Nowadays, China and Russia are in many ways collaborating together, despite their geopolitical differences. Mao and Khrushchev would meet and have talks together. Both would agree that it's fine to have different interpretations of Marxism as long as the end goal would be the same. Or they would actually try to set aside such differences until the capitalist West was utterly defeated and that these topics could arise and be discussed in a better way. Khrushchev would back off a little bit in China, seeing how Yugoslavia was alienated due to Stalin's policies, and he would not like to repeat the same mistakes as Stalin, and also he would be afraid that the Chinese could suddenly turn against him. Relations between China and the Soviet Union, they wouldn't be rosy, but they would be very pragmatical. There would be some beneficial aspect. China would have the manpower, while the Soviets would provide the know-how and even resources. Soviet bases wouldn't be built in China, of course, but the Soviet military-industrial complex would in the first year see a huge growth. China would at first copy many things of the Soviets, but eventually also adapt their own style. India and Pakistan would probably end up switching places in the sense that the West would end up supporting India, while the communist countries would rather support Pakistan in this timeline. As for Vietnam, we would see that Vietnam may at first get more support from all the communist countries and probably the Vietnam War would end a bit faster, but Vietnam may politically become similar to Yugoslavia due to the history it shares with China. Vietnam never really liked China, and even in OTL they side with the US and not China, despite having a communist party in charge. The South China Sea, Korea, Japan and Southeast Asia would become huge flashpoints in world policies, and we could see bigger militarization going on in there, seeing how the Sino-Soviet split wouldn't happen. This would fortify the military relations between the Soviets and China, because of their common enemy, the US. The Soviet intervention in Afghanistan would still happen, but this time around the Soviets wouldn't overspend a lot in militarization because China would be their ally and in some way they would have their back. The intervention could be more successful, or at least be propagated as something more successful, and as a result there wouldn't be the fall of the Soviet Union. What could happen instead is that there would be coordinated efforts to switch or change a bit the economic policies, which is something that anyway happened during the whole existence of the Soviet Union or communist states. I give you some examples: the new economic plan, goulash socialism, etc. More goods could be produced and even exist readily, because China would be the huge factory of the Soviet Union and get the resources they would actually need to do so. The Cold War would rage much stronger in Africa. We could see the same amount of proxy wars going on, but more turned towards the West or against the West. Somalia and Ethiopia, for instance, they would not turn against each other's throats, but they could turn against other countries. Eastern Europe and the other satellite states, they could see some liberalization happening, yes, but never truly break free from their Soviet or Chinese overlords. Where would the US and the European factories go instead? Probably Latin America. The US would not try to mess up with their drug policies, and instead we could see a wealthier Latin America with many companies opting to move there and building their factories in there. India would also be another option, but Latinos, they would still be in general more educated and have a culture somewhat similar to the West, while India would be vastly different. At some point, China could even become stronger and outgrow the Soviets, which could lead to a very interesting reaction. What would happen next? And that's where we leave it for now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.